This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Well, welcome to the program. I'm Roby Brock. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you're staying warm and safe out there. Well, a controversial bill made its way through the Arkansas House of Representatives today. It now heads to the Senate for consideration. We'll talk about a legislative basketball game for charity that's back on for the first time since 2019. Got some details on that. And we'll sit down with Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of Paragould. He's on the House Judiciary Committee. He'll be one of the main authors of a Truth in Sentencing Reform Act that'll be a major piece of legislation for this legislative session. We'll find out where that measure stands right now, what might be parts of it that we haven't heard about before. All of this and more on today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. Talk Business and Politics Daily is brought to you by Wright Lindsay Jennings Law Firm, Impact Management Group, and these sponsors.
We proudly deliver reliable, affordable, responsible power across Arkansas. But demand for electricity is strained by the elimination of sources we need for always-on reliability. And adding intermittents like wind and solar cannot replace workhorses like coal and natural gas that we all count on. Power must be balanced for your needs and our mission. Reliable, affordable, responsible. We're the Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas.
Connection. It's the heart of what we do. It's why we work to better the communities where we live and work. It's why we're expanding to get people connected and create digital equity programs that support affordable internet and digital literacy. We're leaders for positive change. From the way we empower our people, clients, and communities to the way we care for our planet. We live our values every day. We're Cox Communications, and we're pleased to connect with you.
Together we can create an Arkansas that places children and families at the very top of the agenda.
We can create the type of Arkansas that we have always imagined.
Arkansas Advocates as an organization is the glue that can put all those families' voices together.
Welcome back to the program. Joining me now, Representative Jimmy Gazaway, Republican of Paragould. He is one of the co-sponsors of the Truth in Sentencing Reform Act, which will be a major piece of legislation coming later this session. Representative Gazaway, thank you for joining us. First of all, appreciate you making time.
Sure. Always great to be with you, Roby. All
right. Before we get into some of the Truth in Sentencing Reform Act, I want to talk a little bit. If somebody were to pull up your profile and look at the bills that you filed this session, they're going to see about 20 bills that say technical correction 2, technical correction 2. Just to give me an overview of what you do in those technical correction bills. I think that they are not appreciated for some of the tough work that has to go in terms of being a legislator to keep the wheels of justice and other parts of state government moving.
Sure. So those are bills that I've sponsored for the last couple of sessions that come primarily from the Code Revision Commission, which I'm on along with the Speaker. We meet several times a year to go over the Arkansas Code. You know, after every legislative session, the laws that we pass get put into the code. Sometimes you have, terminology that's, contains some references that aren't exact, that may need to be tweaked a little bit, or something was missed at the Bureau, whether that's a comma or it's something that's just technically not correct. And so we go through the entire code, each section of the code. Certain sections pertain to family law. You have a section that pertains to criminal law, a section that pertains to any subject that you want to think about, pretty much. And so we go through every section of the code, determine, what technical corrections need to be made. Occasionally we run across things that are substantive, and so we try to separate those. If there's anything that's substantive at all, then we try to set that aside and run a separate bill for that. But everything that we determine to be purely technical, we file that as a separate bill.
All right. Well, if this lawyer and state representative thing doesn't work for you, you could make it as an editor in the news business, because I spend a lot of my day making a lot of technical corrections too. Thank you for doing that. I know that that's not always the sexy side of legislating, but it is certainly important. So I appreciate all that. Let's talk about the Truth in Sentencing Reform Act. You and Senator Ben Gilmore are co-sponsors on. There's a House version, there's a Senate version. You're obviously the lead in the House. What do you think will be the major sentencing reform changes that will eventually be in that bill once we see a full draft?
Yeah, so what we're looking to do is just completely reform our parole system. You've probably heard Attorney General Griffin talk about that we have a broken parole system, and that is true. The fact is that we have folks who are being sentenced for violent crimes who are only serving a fraction of their sentence. I'm talking about people who are, convicted and sentenced on aggravated robbery, terroristic threatening, aggravated assault, violent offenses who are only serving a fraction of their time. They're being turned back out on the street and they're committing new crimes. Law enforcement is having to rearrest the same people over and over. And so we have this revolving door. And so the purpose is to focus primarily on the violent crime and the serious nonviolent crime so that we end this revolving door. And so that when people are sentenced on those types of offenses, if we say that they get 5 years, then that means they're going to do 5 years. If they get 10 years, that means they're going to do 10 years. There's no more deception in how we operate in the criminal courts. Right now, if someone gets 20 years, that may mean that they do 3. And oftentimes it does, because under our current parole laws, we have, everything from 1/4 all the way down to 1/6 on a lot of crimes. I mean, sexual assault second degree, for instance, which is a Class B felony, carries up to 20 years. That's a 1/6 parole eligibility crime. So even if you get the max, you're going to be eligible to be out in just a little over 3 years. And so that's primarily what we're looking at reforming on that end. And then there's kind of another portion involved for the nonviolent offenses that's going to operate a little differently. But I could go into more detail. I'm happy to give you whatever you want.
Well, I'm always interested in more detail, Representative Gazaway. So yeah, let's talk about that other section. Those would be eligibility for parole that might not, would be longer than what they're serving now, but maybe not as long as some of the more violent criminals. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, I don't know about that. Actually, I think, for the nonviolent offenders, what we're looking at different categories. So there will be some offenses for which there will be no parole. So we're eliminating parole for the most serious violent offenses that we recognize in Arkansas law: murder, aggravated robbery, aggravated assault, things like that. There will be kidnapping. There will be no parole. Then there will be an 85% category that'll be all of the other violent crimes that aren't included in the parole ineligibility 100% classification. So that'll be all of the rest of the violent crimes plus certain serious, what we call serious nonviolent crimes. Not that all felonies aren't serious, but we understand that there's a, kind of a hierarchy. Some are more serious than others. So the serious nonviolent, which are going to include things like human trafficking, arson, and those will be under an 85% essentially early release eligibility. So a person will have to do 85% of their sentence, which is just like the federal system. In the federal system, they don't have parole, but you can be released after having served 85% of your sentence. So there will be that classification, which will be for the other violent crimes and the serious nonviolent, which will be a select few. But then for the other nonviolence, you're going to have a 50% and a 25% category. And the way that'll work is, currently under the parole system that we have now, people are just automatically eligible to be released. They don't have to do anything. We just turn people out after having served a fraction of their sentence because that's the way our law is structured. That's going to end. You can earn, if you earn meritorious good time, if you participate in the programming, if you learn a trade, for instance, you can earn a 50% earned good time credit toward early release for certain nonviolent offenses, then up to 75% for other nonviolent offenses. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the parole reform goes.
Do we know how many people will be affected by this? When you start changing that length of time that people are serving, you're changing the prison population in a pretty significant way, I would imagine. If you've got people getting out after 1/6 of their time versus never having an opportunity to get out or serving 85%. Do you have any statistics or ideas of what that might do to prison population?
So we're working with the Sentencing Commission right now. With every criminal bill that impacts sentencing, the Sentencing Commission prepares a an impact report on how it will affect the prison population. So, of course, we look forward to seeing that. But I will say, in some respects, I do think it will have a significant impact with regard to the violent crime. But in some respects, because our current system is so deceptive, we know if you get 20, that means you'll serve 3. And so I think that you'll see the system respond in some ways to that, so that if the prosecutor and the judge determine that maybe 3 is the appropriate sentence, but right now they have to give them 20 to equal 3, then maybe in the future that you start seeing a lot of sentences that are 3, because we know that 3 means 3 as opposed to 20 means 3. So I think, we're changing some things, but as far as how that will actually impact the prison population, I think that we'll have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, and that's going to be a fluid number anyway, because there's always people coming in and going out. But nonetheless, you still got to prepare budgeting wise for what that's going to cost. So I'll be interested in that component when it comes out. You mentioned some workforce training, some education components there. What all is going to be in the bill that will address recidivism, things to keep people from coming back into the prison system?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of this. I want to be clear that the focus on this is primarily violent crime. As you know, we have a serious violent crime problem in the state, specifically in Central Arkansas. Anyone who lives in the city of Little Rock knows there were more murders in 2022 than the city of Little Rock's history. And so there's a serious violent crime problem in Central Arkansas, but it's not just limited to Central Arkansas. If you read the press reports in Jonesboro, West Memphis, it's communities all over the state that need relief when it comes to the violent crime. So, the focus will be to go hard on that. But to your point, with respect to the nonviolent crimes, what we have to do is try to, number one, divert those folks from hopefully ever entering the prison population to begin with. One way that we're looking at doing that is to try to expand funding for things like drug court, mental health court, veterans courts, our specialty courts, so that instead of sending people to the penitentiary, we can send them to get the treatment that they need. Expanding mental health beds that we have in the state. We don't currently have enough mental health beds and capacity to house people who are truly suffering from a mental health crisis. And so we're looking at expanding funding for that, looking at expanding funding for substance abuse beds in the state. And so the hope is that those folks don't ever enter the prison population to begin with. But for the folks who do, the next portion of that is we want to give them the best chance of success the best chance for success when they leave prison by, implementing certain measures. So there's a lot of things on the table right now. We're looking at everything from when someone leaves prison that they get a copy, or they get their driver's license, they get a birth certificate, they get all the necessary documents that will help them to be able to go get a job and engage in society again. One of the things that we've heard is that a lot of folks, when they leave prison, immediately have to start paying on their fines and fees, and they've not even been able to get on their feet or get a job yet. And so we're looking at delaying, for several months, maybe when that first payment would be due, so that people can help get back on their feet. And then working with the prisons prior to release, really put in the programming to help prepare people, several months in advance of release to, once they're released, to be able to reintegrate well. And so all of that is going to be important in addressing the recidivism.
I'm assuming, because I can put some pretty high price tags on some of the things you just mentioned there with the drug courts and the specialty courts, that there's going to be a pretty healthy fiscal impact statement coming along with this bill too. Am I right in that assumption?
I would say that's a correct assumption.
All right. No ballpark estimates at this point, I would say. You tell me.
Well, I think, there are a lot of things at play there. Number one, we have a capacity issue. And so you were talking about expanding capacity. And of course, that's expensive. But we don't currently have the capacity that we need to house the violent offenders that are causing a lot of the problems. So, there's going to be certainly a cost with that. But I think for our communities, that's worth it. We need to keep our communities safe. And if we don't have the capacity, we can't do it. And that's why we've had the revolving door that we have. So there's that. Then there's the programming that you've mentioned. I mean, obviously, I think it'll tally into the hundreds of millions of dollars, but I can't give you an exact number today.
What is the holdup at present to keeping this bill from being amended and all of these things updated? Kind of where do we stand in that process? When do you think we will see a first draft?
Well, so I guess let me say that there are a lot of proposals that are on the table. One of the things that's been discussed, as you kind of allude to, is an omnibus bill, and we've looked at that. You know, there are some legal concerns about whether or not you can put lots of different proposals that may vary in terms of their intent into the same bill. And so now we're kind of looking at splitting those out, where we kind of initially thought we could put them all into one bill. So, it may be that we have to file a new bill, Public Safety Act of 2023, for instance, and put several of those proposals in. But I'm certainly not opposed to kind of splitting it out. We have changes that are coming with regard to our law on fentanyl. We have changes that are coming with regard to the law on human trafficking. These are all things that are, I think, part of the Attorney General's agenda, part of the governor's agenda. And so they may all be a part of one bill, or we may separate them out. Those are things that we're currently discussing.
Do you think we will see something next week? The reporter in me has to pry a little bit.
Well, I think next week would be a pretty quick timeline, but you never know. We'll see.
All right. Representative Jimmy Gazaway, thank you for your insight on this. I look forward to having you back on and talking more about it once the proposal or proposals flesh out a little bit more. Thank you.
Sure thing. Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. We're back with more right after this. Talk Business and Politics Daily is brought to you by Wright Lindsay Jennings Law Firm, Capital Advisors Group, and these sponsors.
One of the things that I really liked about UAMS College of Health Professions is that they set me up for success. I chose UAMS because I felt like it was a great place to work. My grandmother was diagnosed at UAMS for multiple myeloma, and I felt like it would be a great way to pay back the place that helped my grandmother so much. And that's why I went in the healthcare field in the first place, is to help someone just like they've helped my grandmother.
For your education and healthcare needs, choose UAMS.
This is what we work for. The moments you live for. The joy. The heart. The wonder. At Entergy, we're dedicated to powering each moment. Today and for future generations. So we're leading the way with a cleaner, more reliable power grid to power every day. Because these moments matter. We power life. Entergy.
So not a major day for legislation at the Arkansas State Capitol, but one bill that's been garnering quite a bit of headlines did make its way through the House of Representatives. House Bill 1156, the transgender bathroom bill, passed the House with 80 votes. The measure would require public school districts and open enrollment public charter schools to designate multiple occupancy restrooms and changing areas based on sex. Schools will be required to provide a single occupancy restroom or changing area for individuals unable or unwilling to use a sex-designated multi-occupancy restroom. It now heads to the Senate for consideration. Arkansas lawmakers will square off in the Hoops for Kids' Sake charity basketball game on Wednesday, March 1st at 7 p.m. at Little Rock Central High School. Proceeds will benefit Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Arkansas and the Children's Advocacy Centers of Arkansas. The Senate leads the series 4-3 after its fourth consecutive win in 2019. The game is resuming after that 3-year break following the 2020 onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic. And you can get more details on that at our website at talkbusiness.net. That's all for today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. We'll probably be off tomorrow. The inclement weather's got us having to move some deadlines up a little bit for this weekend's programming. And so it's a little dicey as to whether or not we'll be able to pull everything together for tomorrow. If not, we'll send out a preview of what's coming on this Sunday's Talk Business and Politics, as well as Capital View TV programs. Until next time, I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you then.